Dear brothers and sisters, we have come through Navaratri recently. So Goddess Durga has blessed us, cleansed us. Goddess Lakshmi has come along. Goddess and given us, endowed us with qualities to be able to absorb the divine energy that Mother Saraswati was going to give us. We've gone through that, and actually I was in New Zealand, and on Vijayadashami Day, we started the Sai conference in New Zealand, and we finished it off last night. So it has been a week of really spiritual enlightenment, spiritual energization for all of us, and now this bhajan, this uplifting bhajan, to conclude the long weekend. The life journey of every individual, if you look at it, is a pilgrimage. Whether we are young, we are old, when we start, it's a pilgrimage. And the final destination of our pilgrimage is the place of everlasting happiness. That's what we are looking for. Happiness, not pleasure. Pleasure is merely the interval between two sorrows. But that everlasting happiness, if we find it, that is our true home. The search on our long journey home is for directions, is for clues, is for signs that will take us there. When we are consciously aware that our feet are on the homeward, home-seeking journey, the signs will come from time to time as gifts of grace to support and buoy up our faith. So as we go along, many doubts will enter our mind. Am I on the right track? Is this what I want to do? Particularly when we are young. We haven't had a chance. All these questions will come through our mind. These doubts will come through our mind. And Sati Sai Baba has said, clear all those doubts one by one. Be ever convinced. In fact, he's given us a whole book, called Sandeha Nivarani. Clear all your doubts. And once you are firm on this path, he says, once you've convinced yourself that this is the right path for you, remain steadfast. Shraddha, as we say in Sanskrit. Because if you want to dig a well and you want to hit the water table, you must dig deeper and deeper in the one spot. If you start scattering and digging everywhere, a meter here, half a meter, there, 2 meters, you never hit the water table. The purpose is defeated. So he says, clear all your doubts and then follow whichever path you choose that is comfortable for you. So for our spiritual journey, faith is very essential. Without faith, life becomes a meaningless series of disjointed adventures, which end when the body machine ceases to function. So when the body finishes, that's the end of it. With faith, our lives have a noble purpose and a meaning, and noble purpose and meaning, and we become selfless. Spirituality is living selflessly. Now what do we mean by this? Let's take a character whom we can follow. Let's take Arjuna. Arjuna was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. And there are 3 main characteristics of this depicting a true devotee. The first was absolute faith in the Lord. You will all remember the story when Lord Krishna asked him, Arjuna, what is that thing? He said, it's a bird. Yes, what type of bird? He said, it's a crow. Then he said, no. And Arjuna said, yes, Swami, that's a crow. Then he said, no, that's an eagle. He said, yes, that's an eagle. And Krishna says, have you no faith in yourself? Don't you know what it is? Why are you agreeing with everything I'm saying? And he replied, your words are more powerful than my senses. My senses can give me a false indication, but your words are ever true. The second characteristic is discrimination. He had the foresight. You see, when he was going to war, he was thinking, the doubt went into his mind, I'm going to kill my cousins, my uncles, my grandfather. And, this was troubling him. If you take him and Dharmaraja, you will see he had the foresight. Before the event, he was thinking about all this. Dharmaraja had this problem with him, this thought came into Dharmaraja's mind after the event. So he had hindsight, whereas Arjuna had foresight. And the third is his choice of God over the world. He was offered a whole army to fight the battle at Kurukshetra. But he said, he was given the choice, either an army or Lord Krishna. And he said, Bhagavan, I'll take you. All I need is you, not the army. So that was the faith here. That is the true devotee of the Lord. So we talked about spirituality being living selflessly. What is the meaning of selfless? Love is selfless when it is free of desire and there is no need for possession, reciprocation, or recognition. Service, when we do service, it becomes selfless when there's no separation between the server and the person who is being served. We are selfless when there is no separation between us and God. When we recognize that there is no separation between us and everyone we see is God, at the conference in New Zealand, Dr. Reddy, who was present there, he's the chair of Krishnan Council, was narrating a story about an African American. This chap was very poor. Okay. And every time that Dr. Reddy and his wife go back from Prashanti, he used to say, "Did you bring some vibhuti?" And he will come somehow to the house and collect that vibhuti. So on one occasion, they went home and knew that he was going to call, but he called and he said, "Can I come and collect sorry, they were not at home, okay? So he rang and they left a message on his answering service. And he says, "Can I come and collect this vibhuti at your convenience?" And at the end of that message, he says, "Thank you very much, answering machine, for delivering this message to Dr. and Mrs. Reddy." So even he recognizes that even the answering machine is God. It was doing a service for him. So he narrated the story to us about how everything is God. Whatever we see is God. So the spiritual practices that we have, like meditation, the prayer, the bhajan we just had, studying scriptures, religious rituals, they all prepare us. Everything is a preparation. Like Goddess Durga in the first 3 days of Navaratri, it's preparation, cleansing us. But they're not the end, the result that we seek. For faith and divinity to be manifested in the world, we must act in the world. So we must practice spirituality. Not merely engaging in spiritual practices. So we must actually practice that. Spiritual practices prepare us for a life as it should be led. So particularly for the young ones here today, doing this, however monotonous, however boring you think it is, this is the path that eventually leads you. You are getting the benefit from the elders, people who have gone through this path and found there was reason for this. Okay? And when you go through this process, in your young mind, it will be boring, it will be monotonous, but eventually you will find that that was the right track. I regret today, my mother used to talk about Vaikunta Ekadashi. She used to talk about Vidyarambham. And they were all words to me. I knew what I had to do. When I went to do electrical engineering, I used to take my multimeter and go and place it at the altar. My sister, who was a doctor, used to bring her stethoscope and put it at the altar. But that was all it was. But we did all of that. And today, my regret is I didn't ask her for the deeper meaning of it. What was happening there? So the young ones here today, my message to you is, you have got the benefit. Do what you're doing, but understand what's going on. Okay? When Ashwin was a little boy, he was only 6 months old, we were there in Malaysia, it so happened it was Krishna Jayanti that day. And Krishna Jayanti, they do a bhajan, they do a prayer at midnight, the time he was born. So they used to put a banana leaf, they used to have milk porridge, paisam. And then my father carried him and put his footsteps on the milk, on the paisam. And that was the symbolic thing about Krishna walking and leaving his footprints behind. So symbolically he even goes through that process. But that is the sort of things that they did, but we didn't comprehend what the deep meaning was. So to the young ones I say, here is an opportunity. There are many who can advise you on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and so on. So we must practice this spirituality, not merely engage in the spiritual practices. So spiritual practices will give us a glimpse of heaven. When you sing bhajans, you get elevated. You feel very happy. But the minute you step outside and you drive and somebody crosses your path, that thing disappears very fast. Isn't it? That bliss that you had here, or what we shall say, the satisfaction or the happiness that you had, disappears very quickly. according to the teaching of Swami, the divine principles that we need, okay? So the spiritual practices that we need not only gives us a glimpse of heaven, it lets us experience heaven on earth. So these, according to Swami's teaching, are the divine principles, and they're demonstrated in our lives are the universal human values of the noble character, whose attributes are truth, right conduct, peace, love, and non-violence. And we saw just an example of how Arjuna depicted this. When we build up this faith, and when we have God on our sides, all these things that we accumulate in a worldly situation, we must do them. We must do our studies, we must go to work, we can't just sit back under a tree and say, I'm meditating and God will help me. It doesn't work that way. Faith and effort must go together. So when you're collecting all this, and if you imagine them to be all zeros, you can keep adding any number of zeros. There is no value to it. But the minute you accept God and put a 1 in front of those zeros, you have got everything. There is a story that Swami narrates. And this is a king who invited all his subjects to the palace. And he said, you can come and ask for whatever you want, I'll give you. So naturally everybody came, somebody wanted a Ferrari, somebody wanted a house, somebody wanted this, that and the other, and he gave. Finally when everybody went very happy, they got all their material things, they went, there was one lady left. So the king said, what are you doing? Don't you want anything? She looked at him and said, you said you will give me whatever I ask for. He said, yes, that's my word. He said, will you marry me? So when she marries him, what happens? The whole kingdom is hers. So like that, if you put God as number 1, it lends value to all the zeros. Okay? And sometimes, we say, we pray and we ask for the Lord's blessing. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Something else happens, or we don't get it at all, and we get disappointed. And often people say, you hear elders say, that was the way it was meant to be. You know? And sometimes it's very difficult for us to accept it. Maybe he didn't understand the language I was saying. Maybe it was something different. You know? Like there was a lady who said, Swami, my son passed away, and Swami said, Santosham. And he thought something is wrong here. You know? Maybe he didn't understand that he's actually died. He's saying Santosham, you know, happy. Very happy, he says. You know, because he knew what the person's future was, we don't. You know. So there's a story he tells about that as well. There was a king, and one day he cut his hand. He was doing some work and he cut his finger. So he then called his minister. You know, the minister came. And they said, you know, and they used to go hunting, you see. And he said, how can I go hunting? My finger is cut. So the minister said, everything happens for a reason. The king got very angry. What rubbish is this? And he threw the minister in the prison. Then he got his team together and he went hunting. And it so happened, the team he was with went forward and the king was right behind. There was a gap between them. And he got arrested by the tribes in the jungle. And they took him away, and they took him to the chief, and they said, you brought a very nice person, very handsome, very well endowed, we will sacrifice him to the gods. So they, gave him a bath and put sandalwood powder all over him, and dressed him all up, and got ready. And then the king noticed he had a cut finger. So he said, no, this is defective. We can't offer this to the god. You know, when we offer prasadam to the god, we make sure with the apples and everything, we wash it properly before we put it on the altar. So he said, this fellow with this cut finger, it's defective, we can't offer it to the gods. So the king then was released. So he comes back and he goes to the palace and he goes to the minister and says, you are right, what you said. You said that everything happens for a good reason and it's right. If not for my cut finger, the tribes would have sacrificed me today. And he said, please release him and thank the minister. As he was walking, he turned around and asked the minister, it was good for that to happen to me, but what would it do to you? He said, Your Majesty, if you hadn't cut your finger and you didn't put me in the prison, I would have come with you to the, or if you had cut your finger, I would have come with you to the, as part of the hunting team. When they found your finger was defective, they would have sacrificed me. So I was saved by you putting me in the prison. So everything happens for a good reason, as they say. So one thing we must be very careful is, when the Lord tells us that He doesn't bestow us with what it is that we've asked for, not only is there a good reason, the Lord can do what He wants. It is not a question of whether He will or He won't. There was a time I remember when a car Swami was traveling in ran out of petrol. So Swami told the driver, take a pail, go to the pond over there and bring the water. And he just stirred it with his finger and said, pour it in the tank. And the car went, you see. When they reached Puttaparthi, the driver asked Swami, Swami, there's a shortage of petrol in India, you know. Why don't you take all the water and convert it into petrol? You know. Swami looked at him and said, because a doubting fellow like you will strike a match, put it there, and see whether it is really petrol or not. That's why I don't do it, you see. I only do what is needed. Likewise, there was another time, a vice chancellor, no less, of the university. This guy likes to talk here. And if you give him the microphone, that's it. You can forget dinner, forget lunch, everything. You know? So Swami, he always sits there and he tells Swami, my turn, I want to speak, I want to speak. Swami says, no, sit down. The next time he went, he told Swami, I want to speak. He said, no, sit down. Third time he said, sit down. Fourth time he said, I want to speak. Swami said, okay, speak. He got fed up. He came to the podium, he took the mic, and he went, He couldn't say a word. So, not only can the Lord make the dumb speak, He can make those who speak dumb as well. So we must be very careful what we ask for. And if He says, don't ask, sit down quietly, we better do it. It is very interesting to see the young talents here. You know? The young talents here, singing, playing instruments, what wonderful talents they have. So I'll leave you with this. The talent that you have is God's gift to you. How you use that talent is your gift to God. So make sure you use it in the appropriate fashion and you will be blessed. Jai Sai Ram.